A cold rain drove former Navy SEAL Elias Crow into an abandoned church where he thought he would spend the night alone. Then, a wounded German shepherd stumbled through the door, shaking, bleeding, and looking at him like something was terribly wrong. The dog did not come to hide. It came to lead him somewhere. Behind the church, Elias found an old woman lying in the mud, using her weak body to protect two tiny puppies. Cruel young men had left her there, but the injured dog still came back for the one person who had once shown him kindness. That stormy night, Elias saved a broken family, and in return, he found a reason to stay, to protect, and to heal. Where are you watching from, and how did this story make you feel? Please like and subscribe to help us reach 1,000 subscribers and inspire more stories like this. The rain had started before dusk, but by the time Elias Crow reached the hill above Eldermere, it had settled into something heavier, steadier, not violent, not loud, just persistent. The kind of cold rain that didn't slap you awake. It seeped in, through fabric, through skin, through memory. Elias moved without hurry, boots sinking slightly into the soft ground as he approached the old stone church, St. Bartholomew. The name still clung faintly to the weathered sign, its paint long surrendered to time. He hadn't been here in months, maybe longer. It was hard to tell with days like his, days that blurred into each other like fog across frozen water. Elias Crow was 37, tall, just over 6 feet, built lean and hard, like a man shaped by necessity rather than pride. No beard, no softness left to hide behind. His face was clean-shaven, exposing the sharp lines of a square jaw and high cheekbones that seemed carved more by experience than genetics. His dark brown hair was cut short in a military style, though a little longer than regulation now, just enough to suggest he no longer belonged to that world. But his eyes, they hadn't left it. Gray-blue, cold, watchful, always measuring, always waiting. His clothes told the rest of the story. A worn olive tactical shirt, fabric softened by years of use, edges frayed where the cuffs met his wrists, combat pants, faded and creased, knees scuffed from time spent kneeling, whether in mud, gravel, or something worse. Old work boots, solid, reliable, the kind that didn't quit before you did. He pushed open the church door, the wood groaning in protest. Inside, the air was dry, still, cold in a different way, safer. Elias stepped in and let the door fall shut behind him. For a moment, he just stood there, listening, rain against stone, wind slipping through cracks, the faint creak of old beams remembering weight they no longer carried. He moved toward the front pew and sat, elbows resting on his knees, hands loosely clasped. The posture wasn't conscious. It was something older than thought. Something learned in places where sitting still didn't mean resting. It meant waiting. A memory stirred, uninvited. A dim room overseas. A voice over comms. A hesitation. A mistake. Elias exhaled slowly and closed his eyes. "Not tonight," he muttered under his breath. The rain answered instead. Then, a sound, not from inside, from the door. A dull, uneven thud. Elias didn't move at first. Another thud, weaker this time. Not wind, not debris, something deliberate. His head tilted slightly, the way a soldier listens, not just with ears, but with instinct. Then it came again. Thud. Pause. Thud. A pattern. Elias stood. Slowly. He didn't reach for a weapon. There wasn't one. But his body shifted anyway, weight balanced, steps measured. He approached the door without rushing, his gaze fixed, his breathing steady. When he pulled it open, the rain pushed in first, cold and insistent. And behind it, a dog. A German shepherd stood just outside the threshold. Male, medium large, about 5, maybe 6 years old. Black and tan coat, though the colors were dulled now, darkened by rain, streaked with mud. One ear stood upright, the other tilted slightly, as if unsure whether it still trusted the world enough to listen. Its body told a harder story. Ribs faintly visible beneath wet fur. A fresh wound along the shoulder, ragged, not clean. Old scars layered beneath it, pale lines hidden under the coat but not erased. It didn't step in, not yet. Instead, it looked at Elias, not with fear, not even with desperation, with intent. Then, it lifted its head and struck the door once more with its body. Thud. Then it stopped, waited. Rain ran down its face, but it didn't blink. Elias frowned slightly. "What are you doing out here, huh?" he murmured. The dog took one step forward, then another. It crossed the threshold slowly, like entering sacred ground, not because it believed in it, but because it had learned that crossing lines sometimes came with consequences. It stood just inside, still. Then suddenly, it turned, ran back toward the open door, stopped, looked over its shoulder. A single sharp bark, not loud, not panicked, directed. Elias didn't move. The dog barked again, short, urgent. Then it stepped out into the rain, stopped again, looked back, waiting. Elias let out a quiet breath, something between irritation and disbelief. "No," he muttered. "Not tonight." The dog didn't leave, it didn't wander, it didn't collapse. It just stood there, holding its ground in the rain, waiting. Something in the way it stood, injured, soaked but unmoving, pulled at a place inside Elias he had spent years trying to bury. Not fear, not pity. Recognition. He had seen that look before. Not in civilians, not even in most soldiers, but in the eyes of men who knew they were hurt, and chose to stand anyway because something else mattered more. The dog wasn't asking, it was choosing. And for reasons Elias didn't understand, it had chosen him. Elias looked away first. He stepped back into the church, running a hand over his face. "This isn't my fight," he said quietly, as if saying it out loud might make it true. The rain filled the silence. Behind him, the dog let out a low sound, not quite a whine, not quite a growl. Elias turned. The dog hadn't moved from the doorway. Still there, still waiting, still watching him. Not pleading, just holding the moment open. Elias clenched his jaw. A memory surfaced again, clearer this time. A doorway. A figure on the ground. A call he ignored because it didn't fit the mission. By the time he turned back, too late. Always too late. Elias exhaled sharply, something in his chest tightening. "Damn it!" He stepped forward. The dog didn't react, didn't flinch, didn't retreat. It simply turned and moved out into the rain. This time, Elias followed. The cold hit immediately. Sharper now. He pulled his collar up slightly as he stepped into the downpour, boots finding the uneven ground with practiced ease. The dog moved ahead of him, not fast, not frantic. Measured. It paused every few steps, checked, waited, like it was making sure he was still there. Elias noticed. And for the first time, he adjusted his pace to match it. They moved behind the church, toward the overgrown stretch of land that sloped down into shadow. Mud clung to Elias's boots. Water pooled in shallow dips. The world narrowed to gray, rain, and the steady shape of the dog ahead of him. Then, the dog stopped. Its body went still, ears forward, head low, listening. Elias slowed, his own senses sharpening instinctively. "What is it?" he whispered. The dog didn't answer. Of course it didn't, but it took one step forward, then another, and disappeared briefly behind a broken section of fence. Elias followed, and the world changed. The ground dipped, the mud thickened, and there, just beyond the reach of the church's shadow, something moved. Elias's eyes narrowed. A shape, low, still, then a sound, faint, human. Elias took another step forward, breath slowing, mind shifting fully into focus now. Whatever this was, it wasn't over. And the dog, it hadn't brought him here by accident. The rain felt colder once Elias stepped away from the church. Not because it had changed, but because now it had purpose. It soaked through his shirt faster than before, clinging to his skin, seeping into old scars he didn't talk about. The wind shifted across the open ground behind St. Bartholomew, pushing the rain sideways, making the world feel narrower, more distant from anything resembling comfort. Ahead of him, the German shepherd moved with quiet urgency. Not running, not panicking, just leading. Elias followed, boots sinking deeper into the soft mud as the ground sloped unevenly downward. The terrain behind the church wasn't maintained anymore. Grass long dead, replaced by patches of slick earth and broken stone. A rusted section of fence leaned inward like something had tried to escape rather than keep others out. The dog paused near it, turned, checked. Those amber eyes met Elias again, steady, alert. Then it slipped through the broken gap. Elias hesitated for half a breath, then followed. On the other side, the air felt heavier. The sound of rain softened, strangely muffled by the dip in the land. Trees clustered tighter here, their branches forming a loose canopy that broke the fall of water into irregular drops. The ground was darker, colder, and quieter. The dog slowed. Its body lowered slightly, not in fear, but in focus. Elias noticed the change immediately. "Something's close," he muttered, more to himself than the animal. The dog didn't look back this time. It moved forward carefully, placing each step with intent. Elias mirrored it without realizing. Old habits. You didn't rush into unknown spaces. You read them, listened first, then moved. A sound reached him then, barely there, a breath, or something trying to be one. Elias froze. His eyes scanned ahead. Shapes began to separate from shadow. A low mound, movement. Then, a hand, thin, pale, trembling against the mud. Elias moved fast. She was lying half on her side, half curled inward, like her body had given up trying to stay upright. An elderly woman, 70, maybe older. Small frame, almost fragile, as if time had been taking quiet pieces of her for years. Her gray hair had slipped loose from whatever tie had once held it, strands plastered against her face by rain. Her skin was pale beneath streaks of mud, lips slightly blue from the cold. Her clothes were worn but layered. A heavy coat, old but practical, soaked through now, clinging to her thin shoulders. A knitted scarf twisted around her neck, one end half buried in the mud. Her hands, one pressed into the ground, fingers shaking, the other wrapped protectively around two small bodies. Puppies, German shepherds, no more than a few weeks old. Black and tan like the larger dog, but softer. fur still thick with that early fuzziness, ears not yet committed to standing. They were pressed tightly against her, their tiny bodies trembling, instinctively seeking warmth that she no longer had enough to give. Elias dropped to his knees beside her. "Hey, hey, can you hear me?" he said, his voice low but firm. Her eyes fluttered open, clouded, confused, then focused, slowly, painfully, on him. For a moment, something like fear flickered there. Then, something else. Relief. "You came back," she whispered, her voice barely more than air. Elias frowned. "I wasn't here before," he said. But she didn't seem to hear him. Or maybe she wasn't speaking to him. Behind him, the dog approached. Not rushing, not jumping. It moved straight to the woman's side and lowered itself beside her, pressing its body gently against her ribs, sharing warmth. The puppies reacted instantly, small, weak movements, as they shifted closer to the larger dog, recognizing something safe even if they didn't understand it. Elias watched that for a second, then reached forward, carefully checking the woman's pulse. Weak, but there. "You're freezing," he muttered. The woman's fingers tightened slightly in the dog's fur. "No, don't take them," she whispered. "I'm not taking anything," Elias replied. "I'm getting you out of here." Her eyes shifted, barely, toward the dog, then back to him. A silent question. Elias followed her gaze. The dog didn't look at him. It stayed focused on her, as if she was the only thing that mattered. Footsteps. Elias's head snapped up. Not his. Not the dog's. Different. He turned slightly, body shifting instinctively between the woman and the direction of the sound. 3 figures stood at the edge of the tree line. Young men, early 20s, casual clothes, hoodies, jackets not built for weather like this. One wore a dark beanie pulled low over his forehead. Another had his hood up. The third stood slightly behind them, hands in his pockets like he didn't need to prove anything. The one in front stepped forward first. He was tall, lean in a restless way, movements sharp, like he was always half a second away from doing something he shouldn't. His face was narrow, cheekbones too prominent, eyes quick and calculating. "Didn't expect company," he said, voice carrying easily through the rain. Elias didn't stand. He didn't need to. "Turn around," Elias said calmly. "Walk away." The man smiled, not amused, interested. "That your dog?" he asked, nodding toward the German shepherd. Elias didn't answer. Behind him, the dog's body went still, not tense, ready. The dog lifted its head slowly and looked, not at the man speaking, but at the one behind him. The quiet one. The one who hadn't said a word. And for the first time, the dog let out a low, controlled sound. Not a warning, not fear. Recognition. Elias felt it immediately. That shift. That invisible line being drawn. This wasn't just a random encounter. The dog knew them, and whatever had happened before hadn't ended. The silence stretched. Rain filled the space between them. The second man shifted, glancing at the first. "Let's just grab it and go," he muttered under his breath, not quite quiet enough. The first man raised a hand slightly, stopping him. His eyes stayed on Elias. "You don't want to get involved," he said. "Trust me." Elias finally stood, slowly, every movement deliberate. Water ran down his face, but his expression didn't change. "I already am," he said. The third man, the quiet one, tilted his head slightly, studying the dog more than Elias. "That one ran," he said, almost to himself. "Didn't think it would make it this far." Elias's gaze sharpened. Ran. The word settled into place. The dog hadn't been abandoned. It had escaped. The first man sighed, like this was becoming inconvenient. "Old lady's got no business keeping things that don't belong to her," he said, gesturing vaguely toward Martha. "We're just here to fix that." Martha's fingers tightened weakly. "No," she whispered. "Please." Elias took a step forward. Small, but enough. "They stay," he said. Simple, final. The second man scoffed. "You think you're going to stop us?" Elias didn't respond. He didn't need to. There was something in the way he stood, balanced, grounded, that didn't belong to ordinary confrontations. The kind of stillness that came from having already survived worse. The first man saw it. His smile faded slightly. Not gone, but changed. "Not worth it," he muttered after a moment. He took a step back. The others followed, though the second one clearly didn't like it. The quiet one looked at the dog one last time, long, measured, then turned away. They disappeared into the rain as quickly as they had appeared. Elias didn't move until the sound of their footsteps was gone. Then he exhaled, slowly. Behind him, the dog lowered its head again, pressing closer to Martha. The puppies shifted weakly. Alive. Still here. Elias looked down at them. At the woman. At the dog. At the muddy ground that had nearly taken them. Then back toward the direction the men had gone. "They'll come back," he said quietly. Not a question, a fact. The dog didn't react, but it didn't need to. Elias already knew the answer. He crouched again beside Martha. "We're moving," he said. "Now." She nodded faintly, trusting him without understanding why. Elias carefully slid one arm under her shoulders, lifting her with controlled strength. She weighed almost nothing, too light. The puppies whimpered softly as they were separated for a moment. Then one of them crawled instinctively toward the larger dog. The dog stayed close, always close. Elias adjusted his grip, then stood. Rain hit harder as he turned back toward the church, each step heavier now. Not from exhaustion, from knowing. This wasn't over. It had just started. The walk back to the church felt longer than it should have, not because of the distance, but because of what Elias now carried. Martha's weight in his arms was almost nothing, yet it pressed into him heavier than any pack he had ever worn. Her body trembled faintly against his chest, fragile in a way that made him instinctively adjust his grip, careful not to jolt her, careful not to break something already close to breaking. The rain hadn't let up. If anything, it had grown colder, sharper. It slid down his neck, soaked into the seams of his shirt, and clung there like it had nowhere else to go. Behind him, the German shepherd moved silently. Always just close enough. Never ahead now. Never leaving. The two puppies stumbled between them, small paws slipping in the mud, their movements uncoordinated, but determined. One of them let out a thin, wavering whimper when it fell, then pushed itself back up, instinct driving it forward more than strength. Elias glanced down briefly. "Stay close," he muttered, though he wasn't sure whether he was speaking to them or himself. By the time the church came into view, the sky had dimmed further into a dull gray, the kind that erased shadows rather than deepened them. Elias pushed the door open with his shoulder. The wood groaned again. Inside, the air felt just slightly warmer, dry, still. He carried Martha to the nearest pew and lowered her carefully onto it. The old wood creaked under her weight, though she barely seemed to register it. Her eyes fluttered open again, more focused now, still weak. "You shouldn't have," she whispered, her voice trembling. "They'll come back." Elias crouched in front of her, one knee pressing into the cold stone floor. "They already did," he said quietly. "And they left." "For now," she replied, barely audible. Elias didn't argue, because he knew she was right. The dog entered next. It didn't shake off the water, didn't collapse. It moved straight toward Martha again and lay beside the pew, positioning itself so its body pressed gently against her legs. A barrier, a source of warmth, a decision. Elias watched it for a moment. "You're not hers," he said under his breath. The dog didn't respond, but one ear shifted slightly, catching the tone. The puppies followed clumsily, scrambling up onto the edge of the pew with effort. One nearly slipped off before finding balance, then immediately pressed itself against Martha's side. The other stayed closer to the larger dog, curling instinctively into the curve of its body. Martha's hand moved weakly, resting against the fur of the adult shepherd. This time, the dog didn't pull away, but it didn't lean in either. It simply allowed it. Elias stood and moved quickly around the church, scanning. Old habits, check entry points, check sight lines, check what could be used and what couldn't. The place hadn't changed since the last time he'd been here. Broken, stained glass along one side, patched crudely with boards that let thin streaks of gray light cut across the interior. A collapsed section of balcony above. Dust layered over everything not touched in years, and yet something felt different. Occupied, not by people, but by presence. He pushed the thought aside. Not useful. He found an old storage cabinet near the back, half rotted but still holding together, and pulled it open. Inside were a few discarded blankets, rough and thin, but dry. Good enough. He brought them back and draped one over Martha, tucking it around her shoulders with more care than he expected himself to use. Her fingers clutched the fabric weakly. "Thank you," she murmured. Elias nodded once, then looked at the dog again. "You gonna let me take a look?" he asked. The dog's head lifted slightly. Its eyes met his. No growl, no warning, but not trust either. Elias moved slowly, lowering himself to one knee beside it. "Easy," he said. He reached out, paused, then shifted slightly, letting his hand hover just close enough without touching. The dog watched him, measured. Then, after a long second, it lowered its head. Not surrender, permission. Elias exhaled quietly. All right. He moved closer, fingers finding the edge of the wound along its shoulder. The fur there was matted, sticky with dried blood and fresh rain. The cut wasn't clean. It had been made by something rough, jagged, not an accident. The dog flinched slightly as Elias touched it, but it didn't pull away. "That's gonna need cleaning," Elias muttered. "Probably stitches, if you're lucky." The dog's breathing remained steady, controlled, too controlled, like it had learned long ago that reacting didn't change outcomes. Elias's jaw tightened. Martha shifted behind him. "They hurt him," she whispered. Elias didn't look back. "I figured. They said he was worth more broken," she continued, her voice uneven. "More views, more money." Elias stopped, his hand stilled against the dog's fur. "What do you mean?" he asked. Martha hesitated. Her gaze dropped. I thought they were helping," she said. "When I first found him, he was starving, shaking. I couldn't keep him safe out there. I thought if I gave him to them—" Her voice broke. "I thought they'd take care of him." Elias closed his eyes briefly, then opened them again. "And when did you realize they weren't?" he asked. Martha didn't answer right away. She didn't need to. The silence did it for her. The dog shifted suddenly, not away from Elias, but toward the door. Its entire body went still again, head lifted, ears angled forward, not reacting to sound, to something deeper. Elias followed its gaze. Nothing. Just rain, just wind. But the dog didn't move, didn't blink. And then, slowly, it stepped away from Martha, took 2 careful steps toward the door, and stopped, as if it were remembering something, or expecting it to return. Elias felt a quiet tension settle into his chest. Whatever this animal had lived through, it wasn't over. Not for it. And maybe, not for any of them. Elias stood and walked to the door. He didn't open it, just stood there for a second, listening. Nothing. But the absence of sound didn't feel like safety. It felt like a pause. Behind him, Martha spoke again. "I tried to get him back," she said, "after I saw what they were doing, but they wouldn't let me near him anymore." Elias turned slightly. "And tonight?" he asked. Her hands tightened in the blanket. "He came back," she said, "out of nowhere, covered in blood, dragging himself through the mud. I didn't even know how he found me again." Elias looked at the dog. It had returned to Martha's side, sat down now, not lying, not resting, watching, always watching. "And you came out here?" Elias asked. She nodded faintly. "I heard him, crying," she said. "I thought if I could just get him inside, just for a little while." Her voice faded. "I didn't know they were following him." Elias's eyes hardened slightly. "They weren't following him," he said quietly. "They were tracking him." Martha looked up, fear flickering again. Elias gestured toward the wound. "That wasn't just damage," he said. "That was control, something they could recognize, something they wouldn't let go." The words hung in the air, heavy, real. The puppies shifted again, one of them letting out a soft, sleepy whine before curling tighter against Martha. Elias watched them, small, helpless, completely unaware of the world they had just been pulled into. He exhaled slowly, then looked at the dog. "You brought me to her," he said. "Not the other way around." The dog blinked once, slow, deliberate. Elias gave a faint nod. "Yeah," he muttered. "That makes more sense." He moved toward the back of the church again, scanning once more. Not for shelter now, for defense, because the storm outside wasn't the only thing building. The rain eased some time after midnight, not fully, just enough to change the sound. It no longer struck the stone walls of the church with steady insistence. Instead, it slipped and tapped, uneven, quieter, like something losing strength, but not yet willing to let go. Inside St. Bartholomew, the air had shifted, warmer by a fraction, occupied now. Elias Crow sat on the edge of a wooden pew, forearms resting on his thighs, hands loosely clasped. The posture looked relaxed to anyone who didn't know better, but his shoulders were set just a little too tight, his gaze just a little too still. He wasn't resting. He was waiting. Across from him, Martha Hale lay half-reclined, wrapped in the thin blanket he had found. Her breathing had steadied slightly, though it still came shallow, like each inhale had to be convinced. Her face looked different now that some of the mud had dried, older, not just in years. There was a softness in her features that hadn't hardened despite everything. Eyes that had spent a lifetime choosing kindness, even when it cost her something she couldn't afford to lose. Her gray hair framed her face loosely, still damp, still clinging to her temples. She looked smaller in the quiet, like the storm had peeled something away from her. At her side, one of the puppies slept, tiny ribs rising and falling in uneven rhythm. The other lay curled against the larger German shepherd, its nose tucked into the curve of the dog's front leg. The adult dog, Ranger, though Elias hadn't named him aloud yet, remained awake, always awake, head up, eyes open, watching. Not just the door, everything. Elias broke the silence first. "You didn't just find him," he said quietly. Martha didn't look at him. Her fingers tightened slightly in the blanket. "I told you. I saw him by the road," she replied. Elias shook his head once. "No," he said. "That's not what happened." His tone wasn't harsh. It didn't need to be. It carried something else, certainty. The kind that didn't come from guessing. It came from seeing patterns too many times to ignore them. Martha swallowed, slowly. "I didn't mean to lie," she whispered. "That's not what I said," Elias replied. A pause settled between them, long enough to feel, short enough not to break. Then Martha shifted, her eyes finally meeting his. "You don't understand," she said. "I thought I was helping." Elias leaned back slightly, not relaxing, just giving her space to speak. "Then help me understand," he said. Martha's gaze drifted, not to the door, not to the windows, but to the dog. Ranger didn't look back at her. He stayed still, unmoved, but aware, always aware. "I found him months ago," Martha began, her voice steadier now, though it carried a tremor beneath it. "He wasn't like this. Not yet." She paused, as if searching for the right place to begin. "He was thin, but not broken. Scared, yes, but still hopeful." She let out a faint breath. "You can see that in them, you know. In animals. Before the world teaches them otherwise." Elias didn't interrupt. Martha continued. "He used to come close, slowly, like he was testing whether kindness was real or not." Her lips trembled faintly. "I fed him scraps, let him sleep near the shed behind the church. I told myself it was enough." Elias's eyes narrowed slightly. "But it wasn't," he said. Martha shook her head. "No," she admitted. "It wasn't." The dog shifted slightly. Not toward her, not away. Just enough to remind them both that he was still listening. "There were people in town," Martha continued. "Young men. They said they worked with animals. Said they could take him somewhere safe, somewhere warm." Her voice dropped. "They smiled when they said it. That was my mistake." Elias's jaw tightened. "What made you believe them?" he asked. Martha hesitated, then gave a small, sad smile. "Because I wanted to," she said. The answer landed heavier than anything else she could have said. "They came back twice," she continued. "Checked on him, brought food. They were patient, polite." She looked down at her hands. "Better than most people these days." Elias didn't move. "And then?" he asked. Martha's fingers curled into the blanket. "I let them take him." The words came out barely above a whisper. Silence followed. Not empty, heavy. The kind that pressed into the space between two people and demanded to be acknowledged. Elias nodded once, slowly. "That's when it changed," he said. Martha's eyes closed briefly. "Yes." Ranger stood up. No warning. No sound. One moment he was lying still. The next he was on his feet, body rigid, ears forward. But he wasn't looking at the door. He was looking at Martha. Directly. For the first time since they had entered the church. Their eyes met. and something passed between them, silent, unspoken, but unmistakable. Martha's breath caught, not from fear, from recognition, not of who he was, but of what she had done. Ranger didn't growl, didn't move closer. He just looked, and in that gaze there was no accusation, no anger, just distance. A quiet line drawn between what had been and what could never be the same again. Elias felt it too, that shift, that fracture. Some things didn't break loudly. They broke like this. Martha turned her face away, unable to hold the weight of it. "They hurt him," she said, voice shaking now. "Not all at once. Not in ways you could point to and say, 'This is wrong' in a court." Elias's eyes darkened. "How?" he asked. "They trained him," she said. Or that's what they called it. Her lips pressed together. "They made him fight. Not other dogs at first, just obedience, fear, control." Elias leaned forward slightly. "And when he resisted?" Martha didn't answer. She didn't need to. The scars did it for her. "They filmed it," she added after a moment. "Said people paid to watch. Said it was entertainment." Elias's hands tightened slowly, not visibly, but enough. "And you didn't go to the police?" he asked. Martha shook her head. "I tried," she said. "Once." Her eyes flickered, something harder now. "There's a deputy in town, Ron Halstead, mid-40s. Good man, people say. But tired." She gave a faint, bitter smile. "Too many small problems, not enough proof for the big ones." Elias listened. "She told me, unless I had something solid, something they could act on." Martha shrugged weakly. "It would just be my word against theirs." "And that wasn't enough," Elias finished. "No," she said. Elias stood and walked a few steps away, running a hand through his damp hair. The pieces were aligning now, not cleanly, but clearly. "So he ran," Elias said after a moment. Martha nodded. "2 nights ago," she said. "I heard something outside. Found him near the road, barely standing, covered in blood." Her voice broke again. "I didn't think he'd survive." Elias glanced at Ranger. The dog had returned to his position near the puppies, watching, always watching. "And yet he came back to you," Elias said. Martha looked at him, confused. "I didn't understand that either," she admitted. Elias exhaled slowly. "I do." Martha frowned slightly. "How?" Elias didn't answer right away, because the answer wasn't simple. "He didn't come back because he trusted you," Elias said finally. The words were quiet, careful, but they landed. Martha flinched. Elias held her gaze. "He came back because you were the last place he remembered that wasn't pain." The truth sat between them, uncomfortable, necessary. Martha's eyes filled, though no tears fell. "I thought I was saving him," she whispered. Elias nodded once. "You were," he said, "at first." Then his expression hardened slightly. "But you also handed him back." Martha closed her eyes. "I know," she said. The puppies shifted again, one of them letting out a soft, sleepy whimper. Ranger lowered his head slightly, nudging it closer, steadying it. A small, quiet act, unnoticed by most, but not by Elias. Elias turned back toward the door. The rain had nearly stopped now. Only a faint dripping remained. "They're not done," he said. Martha opened her eyes. "I know." Elias looked at her, then at the dog, then at the small, fragile lives curled between them. "This isn't just about a dog anymore," he added. No one argued. because they all understood, in their own way, that something had already crossed a line, and it wasn't going back. The night settled slowly over St. Bartholomew, not like a curtain falling, but like something creeping in, patient and deliberate. The rain had thinned into a cold drizzle, but the wind had taken its place. It pressed against the old church walls, slipped through cracks in the boards, and whispered across the stone floor like a voice that didn't want to be heard clearly. Inside, the dim light had faded to shadows. Elias Crow didn't light a fire. Didn't dare. Light meant visibility. And visibility meant being found. He stood near one of the broken windows, just far enough back to remain unseen, his silhouette blending into the darker lines of the church interior. His posture was relaxed to an untrained eye, but there was a tension beneath it, a readiness that never quite left him. Outside, the world looked still, too still. Elias had learned a long time ago that silence like that wasn't peace. It was anticipation. Behind him, Martha shifted slightly on the pew. The blanket rose and fell with her breathing, still shallow, but steadier now. Her face had regained a touch of color, though her hands still trembled occasionally, fingers curling unconsciously as if bracing against something that hadn't yet arrived. The puppies slept close to her side. One sprawled awkwardly across her arm, its tiny body warm but fragile, legs twitching faintly as it dreamed. The other remained pressed against Ranger, tucked safely beneath the curve of the older dog's body. Ranger hadn't slept. Not once. He stood a few feet from the door now, not touching it, not pacing, just positioned there like something anchored between two worlds. Inside, outside, waiting. His head was slightly lowered, ears angled forward, eyes fixed on something beyond the visible. Elias watched him for a moment. "You hear it before I do, don't you?" he murmured quietly. Ranger didn't move, didn't react, but Elias knew. That was answer enough. Elias stepped away from the window, moved toward the door, not quickly, not cautiously, just deliberately. Each step measured, each breath controlled. He paused a few feet from the entrance, listening. Nothing obvious, no voices, no footsteps. But the absence of those things didn't settle him. It sharpened him. Elias reached out and pressed his hand lightly against the wood. Cold, wet from the outside. The faint vibration of wind carried through it. And something else, subtle, almost nothing, but not quite. He opened the door just a few inches, enough to see, not enough to be seen. The night air slipped in immediately, sharp, biting, carrying the scent of wet earth and something metallic beneath it. Elias's eyes adjusted quickly. He scanned left, then right, then beyond. And there, faint, at the edge of the tree line, a pair of lights, low, stationary, not headlights pointed forward, parked, waiting. Elias's gaze narrowed. He closed the door quietly, turned, and walked back inside without a word. Martha was watching him now, her eyes clearer than before, afraid but not surprised. "They're out there, aren't they?" she whispered. Elias didn't answer right away. He moved past her, checking the back of the church again, scanning the darker corners, the broken sections of wall, the places where someone could slip in without being seen. Then he spoke. Yes. One word, flat, certain. Martha closed her eyes briefly. "They won't stop," she said. "Not until they get him back." Elias glanced at Ranger. The dog hadn't moved. Still at the door. Still listening. "Why?" Elias asked. Martha swallowed. Her hands tightened in the blanket again. "Because he's worth something," she said. Elias's expression didn't change. In what way? Martha hesitated, then answered anyway. They trained him to respond, she said, not just to commands, to signals, pain, fear, timing. He knows things other dogs don't. Elias leaned slightly against one of the wooden beams. Meaning? They can make him do what they want, she said, and people pay to see that. The words hung in the air. Ugly. Real. Elias nodded slowly. And now he doesn't, he said. Martha shook her head. No, now he won't. Ranger shifted, just slightly. His head turned, not toward the door this time, but toward Elias. For a brief second, their eyes met, and something passed between them. Not trust, not yet, but recognition. Two beings who understood control, and what it meant to break free from it. Ranger moved away from the door, not toward Martha, not toward the puppies, toward Elias. He stopped just a few feet in front of him, close enough to feel his presence, far enough to keep his distance. Then, slowly, Ranger lowered his head, not in submission, not in fear, but in something else, something quieter, a choice. Elias didn't reach out, didn't move, but he felt it, that moment, a line shifting, not erased, but moved. Ranger turned again after a second, back toward the door, as if the moment had passed, as if it didn't matter. But it did. Elias knew it did, because for the first time, the dog hadn't just tolerated him. He had acknowledged him. Elias straightened. They're not just waiting, he said. They're watching. Martha looked at him. What does that mean? It means they know we're still here, Elias replied. Her breath hitched slightly. Then why haven't they come in? Elias's gaze flicked toward the door. Because they're deciding how, he said. Silence followed. Not empty, heavy again, but different now. More focused. Elias moved to the center of the church. He scanned the space again, not for comfort, not for shelter, but for structure. What could be used, what couldn't, where to stand, where not to. Old instincts layered themselves over the present. Not loud, not dramatic, just there, waiting to be used. Behind him, Martha spoke again. There's something else, she said. Elias turned. Her expression had changed. Not just fear now, something closer to urgency. They don't just take dogs, she continued. Sometimes they take whatever's connected to them. Elias's eyes sharpened. You mean people? Martha nodded faintly. If they think it matters enough. Elias looked at Ranger again, then at the puppies, then back at her. Then we make sure it doesn't, he said. Outside, the wind picked up again. The faint lights at the edge of the tree line flickered slightly. Still there, still waiting. Elias stepped closer to the door once more, not to open it, not this time, just to stand near it, to listen, to feel. Ranger moved beside him, not touching, not leaning, just present. Two figures, different lives, same position. Elias spoke quietly. They think this ends tonight, he said. Ranger didn't react, but his ears shifted slightly. Elias exhaled. They're wrong. Not the kind that howled, the kind that pressed. It leaned against the walls of St. Bartholomew as if testing them, searching for weakness, slipping its fingers through every crack the building had forgotten to hide. Elias Crow stood near the center aisle, shoulders squared, eyes steady. He didn't move much, didn't need to. The room had already been mapped in his mind. Distances, angles, weight. The old pews, solid, heavy enough to slow someone down. The central aisle, clear but narrow. The door, thick wood but worn hinges. Every object had a purpose now, even the silence. Ranger stood slightly ahead of him, not at the door, not at Martha's side, in between, positioned instinctively, not as a pet, not as something waiting for command, but as something that understood the shape of danger without needing it explained. His body was tense, though not rigid, balanced, ready. The wound on his shoulder had begun to stiffen, the blood darkened now, less visible. But the way he held that side told the truth. He favored it slightly, distributing weight to compensate. Still, he did not step back. Behind them, Martha sat upright now, though barely. The blanket had slipped slightly from her shoulders, her thin frame trembling beneath it. But her hands, those hands that had once hesitated, were now firm, wrapped protectively around the two small puppies. She had moved them behind the pew, not far, but enough. Her eyes were wide, not with panic, with decision. The first sound came from outside, not footsteps, not voices. A click, metal, controlled. Then, the door handle shifted, slowly, deliberately. Elias didn't turn, didn't rush. He simply shifted his weight slightly to the balls of his feet, prepared. The door opened, not wide, just enough. A sliver of darkness cut into the church, then widened, and they stepped in. 3 figures again, but different now. No hesitation, no casual posture. They carried purpose with them. The first man, the one who had spoken earlier, led again. He looked the same, tall, lean, sharp features. But something in his eyes had changed. Less curiosity, more certainty. Behind him, the second man, shorter, broader, his face rougher, jaw unshaven, the kind of man who relied more on force than thought, stepped in with a slight grin that didn't reach his eyes. The third, the quiet one, remained near the door, watching, always watching. "You should have walked away," the first man said calmly. His voice echoed slightly in the empty space. Elias didn't respond. He didn't need to. The man's gaze shifted to Ranger. "There you are," he said softly. Not relief, ownership. Ranger didn't move, didn't lower his head, didn't growl. He simply watched. "We're taking him," the man continued, "and we're leaving. No need to make this worse than it has to be." Elias finally spoke. "No, just that, nothing more." The second man scoffed. "Yeah," he muttered, "we tried the nice version already." He stepped forward, too quickly, too confidently. Elias moved, not fast, not dramatic, just enough. His hand caught the edge of a pew and shifted it slightly, barely noticeable, but enough to alter the man's step. The man stumbled, just a fraction. But it was enough. Elias closed the distance in one smooth motion, his hand gripping the man's wrist, twisting, not violently, but precisely. The man gasped, lost balance, dropped. The sound of his body hitting the floor echoed louder than it should have. The first man didn't react with panic. He watched, measured, adjusted. The third man closed the door behind them. The click of it sealing shut felt final. "All right," the first man said, exhaling slowly. "We'll do it this way." The shift was immediate. No more talking, no more negotiation. The second man pushed himself up, anger now visible, in the way his shoulders tightened, the way his breathing changed. "You're gonna regret that," he snapped. Elias didn't answer, because regret wasn't part of the equation anymore. He saw the movement before it happened. A glance, a shift. The second man lunged, not at Elias, but toward the pew, toward the puppies. Martha cried out, not loudly, but sharp enough to cut through everything. "No!" She pulled the puppies closer, her body folding over them instinctively, shielding them with what little strength she had left. Ranger moved, faster than before. Despite the injury, despite the weight, he crossed the distance in a blur of motion, placing himself between the man and Martha, his body angled protectively. The man hesitated, just for a second, because this wasn't the same animal they had broken before Ranger didn't attack. Not yet. He stood, held the line, eyes locked. The first man reached into his jacket, not hurried, not frantic, calm, and pulled out something small, a device, barely visible in his hand. He pressed it. A soft, sharp tone cut through the air, high-pitched, precise. Ranger froze, completely. Not out of fear, out of memory. His body stiffened, not in resistance, but in conflict. For a single, fragile second, he didn't know which instinct to follow. The one they had forced into him, or the one he had chosen. Elias saw it. That hesitation, that fracture, and understood something instantly. This wasn't just a fight. It was control trying to reclaim what it had lost. "See," the man said quietly. "He still remembers." Ranger's breathing changed, faster, uneven. His paw shifted. Just slightly, Elias stepped forward. One step, into Ranger's space, not touching him, not commanding him, just there, present, solid. "Look at me," Elias said. Not loud, not forceful, but steady, grounded. Ranger didn't respond immediately. The tone echoed faintly in his ears, the past pulling one way, the present another. Elias didn't move, didn't repeat himself. He just stood there, unwavering. Ranger's eyes flickered. From the man to Elias, back again. Then, slowly, his body shifted. Not backward, not forward, toward Elias. Just enough. Just once. The tone device clicked off. The moment passed. But it left something behind. Something that couldn't be undone. The first man's expression hardened. "Fine," he said. Everything broke at once. The second man charged again, this time at Elias. No hesitation, no redirection. Elias stepped aside, redirecting the momentum, using the man's own force against him. A hand to the shoulder, a shift of weight. The man hit the side of a pew hard. Wood cracked. Not completely, but enough. The third man moved now, faster than before. He went for Ranger. Ranger reacted. Not as something controlled, not as something trained, but as something free. He moved, direct, decisive, not reckless, precise. He intercepted the man before he reached the puppies, forcing him back with nothing more than presence, raw, undeniable presence. The man faltered, stepped back, not out of fear, but out of recalculation. Elias turned back to the first man. They faced each other now, clear, unobstructed. "You're not leaving with him," Elias said. The man smiled faintly, but there was no humor in it now. "Then no one leaves," he replied. The wind outside rose again, harder, pushing against the walls, rattling the old structure. Inside, everything held, barely. Elias didn't respond, because he didn't need to. He had already made his choice. The storm didn't end all at once. It loosened its grip, gradually, like something exhausted rather than defeated. By the time the first pale light touched the horizon, The rain had faded into a fine mist, and the wind had retreated to a distant murmur beyond the trees. The world outside St. Bartholomew looked washed, not clean, but quieter. The kind of quiet that comes after something has broken. Inside the church, the silence felt different, earned. Elias Crow stood near the doorway, one hand resting lightly against the worn wood, his posture relaxed for the first time in hours. Not careless, just no longer braced for impact. The three men were gone, not by choice. The sound of tires had come before dawn, not the same low, waiting presence from earlier. This was different, deliberate, official. Elias had heard it first, even before Ranger shifted position. Then came the knock, firm, measured, not asking, announcing. Deputy Ron Halstead stepped into the church with the kind of presence that didn't try to fill a room, but ended up doing it anyway. He was in his mid-40s, built solid but worn in subtle ways. His uniform jacket was damp at the shoulders, dark from the weather, the badge on his chest catching what little light remained. His hair, cut short and thinning slightly at the temples, clung faintly to his skin. His face was clean-shaven, but there was a heaviness around his eyes, the kind that didn't come from lack of sleep alone. It came from years of choosing which problems to carry, and which ones to leave behind. Behind him stood another officer, a younger man, maybe late 20s, tall, broad-shouldered, with a stiffness in his stance that hadn't yet been worn down by experience. His name badge read Keller. His gaze moved quickly across the room, alert, uncertain, trying to absorb more than he was ready to understand. Halstead didn't speak immediately. He looked at Elias, at Martha, at the dogs, at the broken pew, at the mud tracked across the stone floor, at the chain lying near the center aisle. His eyes lingered there, then returned to Elias. "You want to tell me what happened?" he asked. His voice was calm, not skeptical, not convinced, just open. Elias didn't rush. He didn't embellish. He didn't soften anything. He told it straight. From the moment the dog arrived, to the men, to the device, to the fight. Halstead listened, not interrupting, not reacting, just taking it in. Keller shifted slightly beside him, glancing at the chain again, then at Ranger. The dog watched them both. Not aggressive, not submissive, evaluating. When Elias finished, the church fell quiet again. Halstead nodded once, then stepped forward. He crouched near the chain, picking it up carefully with gloved hands. The metal links were worn, stained, old marks layered with new ones. He turned it slightly, examining it with a familiarity that suggested he'd seen things like this before. "Not the first time," he muttered. Keller frowned. "What do you mean?" Halstead didn't look up. "There's been reports," he said. "Nothing that stuck. Dogs going missing, people hearing things out near the outskirts, videos that surface for a day, then disappear." He set the chain down again, never enough to build a case. Martha shifted on the pew. "They filmed it," she said quietly. Halstead looked at her then, really looked, not just at her condition, but at her, at the weight she carried. He nodded slowly. "I believe you," he said. Simple, direct, no hesitation. Martha's shoulders trembled slightly, not from cold this time, from relief. Keller moved toward the door. "They're not out there anymore," he said after a quick scan. Elias stepped closer. "They won't be far," he replied. Halstead stood. "They won't be hard to find now," he said. There was something different in his voice now, not just acknowledgement, decision. Outside, the light strengthened, not bright, but enough to push back the shadows. Ranger stood, not abruptly, not tense, just rising. He moved past Elias, past Halstead, toward the doorway. No one stopped him. No one called him back. He stepped outside, into the damp morning air, and stood there, still, facing the tree line, the same place the danger had come from, the same place it had disappeared into. For a long moment, he didn't move, didn't react. Then, slowly, he turned his head, not back toward the forest, toward the church, toward Elias. Their eyes met, and in that quiet exchange there was no urgency left, no warning, just something else, something steadier, as if whatever had needed to be faced had already been faced. Elias stepped out after him. The ground was soft beneath his boots, the mud beginning to settle as the rain eased. The air smelled different now, cleaner, though still carrying the weight of what had passed. Halstead joined him a moment later, hands resting at his sides. "You staying?" the deputy asked. Elias didn't answer right away. He looked at the church, at the broken edges, at the worn door, at the place he had once used as nothing more than shelter, then at Martha, visible through the doorway, wrapped in a blanket, holding the puppies close, then at Ranger, standing beside him, not leaving. Elias exhaled slowly. "Yeah," he said. Hours passed, not quickly, but not heavily either. The kind of time that moves forward because it has to, not because anyone is pushing it. More officers arrived, vehicles, voices, measured conversations. The 3 men were picked up before noon, not far, just far enough to think they had time. They didn't. Inside the church, Martha sat upright now, a second blanket wrapped around her shoulders. Her hands still trembled occasionally, but her eyes had changed. Less fear, more presence. She watched as Keller carefully took notes, his earlier stiffness replaced by something more grounded, something shaped by what he had seen. "Will they come back?" she asked quietly. Halstead shook his head. "No," he said, "not like that." Martha nodded, not fully convinced, but willing to believe it. Ranger lay near the doorway again, resting, but not fully. His breathing was slower now, though every now and then his body would twitch slightly, small reactions to sounds that weren't there anymore. When Keller stepped too close, Ranger's ears flicked back briefly. Not aggression, just caution. Learned, embedded. Elias noticed. He crouched beside the dog, didn't reach out, didn't push, just stayed there, present. Ranger glanced at him, then looked away. But he didn't move. That was enough. By afternoon, the church felt different. Not restored, not yet, but changed. The broken pew had been moved. The chain was gone. The floor cleared of most of the mud. Light filtered in more clearly now, catching on dust that had once gone unnoticed. Martha spoke again, softer this time. "I shouldn't have given him to them," she said. Elias didn't respond immediately. He looked at Ranger, at the way the dog's body rose and fell, at the tension that hadn't fully left him. "You didn't know," Elias said. Martha shook her head. "I should have," she replied. Elias nodded slightly. "Maybe," he said, then added, "But you stayed." Martha looked at him, confused. Elias gestured lightly toward Ranger. "When it mattered," he said. The words settled, not erasing anything, but shifting it, just a little. Outside, the sky had begun to clear, not fully, but enough for light to break through. Elias stood at the doorway again, Ranger beside him, the puppies inside, Martha resting, The storm behind them, the world ahead, uncertain, unfinished, but no longer out of reach. Elias spoke quietly, more to himself than anyone else. "Some things don't go away," he said. Ranger's ears shifted slightly. Elias looked at him. "They just stop owning you." The dog didn't respond, but he stayed. And that was answer enough. There are storms in life that do not announce themselves with thunder. They arrive quietly, in choices we make, in people we trust too easily, in moments when we think we are doing good, but do not yet see the full cost. This story is not just about a wounded dog or a broken past. It is about something deeper. It is about the truth that kindness, when placed in the wrong hands, can still lead to pain. But even then, it is never wasted, because love leaves a mark, even on those who have been hurt. That dog did not return because the world was kind to him. He returned because somewhere, in the middle of fear and suffering, he remembered a moment when someone chose to care. And sometimes that is enough to change everything. God does not always remove the storm. Sometimes he sends someone into it. A man who stays when it would be easier to walk away. A soul that chooses to protect, even when nothing is certain. A wounded creature that still finds the courage to trust again. In our daily lives, we may never face a moment like this, but every day we are given a quiet choice, to ignore or to step closer, to judge or to understand, to leave or to stay. And maybe the miracle is not something loud or impossible. Maybe the miracle is this, that even after everything breaks, something inside us still chooses love. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who may need a little hope today. Leave a comment and tell us where you are watching from. And if you believe in stories that remind us of compassion, courage, and faith, consider subscribing to the channel. May God bless you, protect your loved ones, and guide your steps, even through the storms you cannot yet see.